All right, all right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Oppenheimer Part 2.
Part two.
Woo.
We are here recording this 2 days after the Oscars, where Oppenheimer won 7 Oscars, including Best Directing, Best Picture, Best Leading Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Editing. I think I'm missing one. You get the idea. It won a lot of Oscars. So, exciting time.
It was pretty good, man. I mean, like, at some point, it just deserved that many Oscars.
It was very good. Very good. So we already kind of talked about the Manhattan Project. We talked about how or where America is during this time and the influence communism has on the country. We've talked about dropping the bomb on Japan. And now we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to go to a couple of hearings. And this is really where our plot is told is from these 2 different hearings. One is going to be centered around J. Robert Oppenheimer himself. And the other one's going to be centered around Admiral Strauss. Strauss?
Strauss is how he pronounces
Strauss.
it. It's spelled Strauss, but it's Strauss.
Okay. All right, man. So when did these hearings take place?
So Strauss's hearing takes place in 1959. Oppenheimer's hearing, however, let me scroll. It takes place in 1954.
Okay.
So Oppenheimer's hearing is 9 years after the conclusion of World War II, and Strauss's hearing is 5 years after that. So it's a hot minute between the end of the events in color in the movie and the beginning. Well, Oppenheimer's trial is in color, isn't it?
Most of it, yeah.
Most of it, okay. So it's a hot minute between the hearing for Oppenheimer and the conclusion of the Manhattan Project.
Yep. Okay. So these 2 are gonna cross paths earlier on. Strauss is head of Princeton.
He is in charge of recruiting talent for Princeton. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if he's actually the head of it, but honestly, that point of history, other than he tries to recruit Oppenheimer, isn't super important. What's more important is that Strauss is on the Atomic Energy Commission, and he's the chairman.
He successfully recruits Oppenheimer, right? He heads the institute at Princeton.
In like actual history, he does. They leave it pretty vague in the movie to kind of stoke this newly revealed resentment of Oppenheimer that you get at the end of the movie. So sorry, spoiler. Whoops.
Right. So yeah, so he's going to head this institute at Princeton. And then there's going to be this pivotal scene, and we kind of talked about it earlier on, but there's going to be basically 2 points where Oppenheimer and Strauss are going to butt heads, and Strauss is going to feel insulted by Oppenheimer. The first is here in the timeline of the movie. This is the first. I'm not sure which one actually happens first, where Einstein and Oppenheimer are together, standing next to like this pond, and then Einstein walks by Strauss and doesn't acknowledge him at all, and he says, "I wonder what he said to him," and it bugs him, and that's kind of the first time you really start to see Strauss as a character and his major flaw of his ego, as well as how much he needs to be respected by his peers.
Yeah, he's very he's a self-made person, at least in the movie. That's what he wants you to believe. And from my research, he is, but he's not, if that makes sense. Like he's one of those guys who was kind of born into the gift of being upper middle class lower
Mm-hmm.
upper class economically speaking. His self-made part is that he himself rises through the ranks of politics. He's not born into a political family.
Okay.
So he leverages his skills, of which he does admittedly have many, diplomatically and otherwise, to these immense positions of power that he had no societal right to be in at that time,
Mm-hmm.
because politics back then was even more lineage based than it is today. So it's not that people from non-political families didn't get elected, but to sit as the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, no matter how wealthy you were, was a big deal. Like that's a big political stick to wave around.
I guess we should preface this by saying, like, if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, first episode, you're fine. I feel like you know what happens. They drop the bomb. Everyone knows the Trinity test happens.
Mm-hmm.
This part is not as well known, and we're gonna be spoiling some key moments of the film. Uh, Again, it's history, but I didn't know anything about Strauss before watching Oppenheimer, so um,
And
it may
unlike
be a spoiler.
Napoleon, and unlike Napoleon, we're not really able to fully analyze this movie with leaving things unsaid.
Mm-hmm.
Arguably because it's a better movie and it fits together more organically
Mm-hmm.
than the things Napoleon did. So yeah, definitely don't go further into this episode if you want surprise as to how the movie goes. Like watch
Right.
the movie and then come back.
Yes. You should have
Now that
watched the
we've
movie
said
already.
that, yeah, you
Should have
should
watched the
have.
movie already. It's so good. Okay, so early on, it's brought up an accusation against Oppenheimer, and then someone responds, "This is McCarthy era." So we talked a little bit about, communism, but communism post World War II, a little more like a witch hunt. Am I right?
Yeah, so now we know, based off of watching Oppenheimer in the first episode, that communism does not just appear in the United States post World War II. It's here
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. And that American communists and communist pre Cold War, with the exception of the Soviet Union, are not necessarily the same breed, so to speak, of
Mm-hmm.
communists that we all know and hate and love to hate after World War II and into the Cold War. So the McCarthy era is started by Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin, I do believe. Long story short, he's a pretty unsuccessful politician who very quickly realizes that fear of the Soviet Union post World War II, because the Soviet Union and the United States are the only two world players left alive after
Mm-hmm.
that war. Britain's there, but it's a literal shadow of its former self. Germany is effectively gone. Japan's basically America's new colony economically and politically. France is rebuilding itself from total and utter destruction. So you've got the U.S. and you've got the Soviet Union. Um, and the Soviet Union, in popular memory, is a much more militant, much more like maniacal power than the United States is. At least that's the perception in the United States. So Senator McCarthy is like, I bet that this fear of the Soviet Union has also created an irrational fear of communists. And I
Right.
bet if I accuse a bunch of people who are leftists or creative or actual communists
Or
of
just
being
enemies of him, correct?
exactly, yeah, or
Right.
people I don't like of being communist, I can get them kicked out of positions. And so first it starts as a look at me, I'm hunting the communists, and then the more it works, the more it becomes how do I attack my political opposition
Right.
with this. So when they reference the McCarthy era, the McCarthy era is a lot like the civil rights movement a decade later in the sense that after it's over, people love to imply that they're on the right side. That they're like,
Right.
well, it was the McCarthy era. Everybody was crazy.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that's so the when Einstein walks by Strauss, you have that's the first kind of implication that those two that he feels jealous and feels kind of disrespected
Mm-hmm.
by Oppenheimer. The second is a little more direct and a little more intentional. They are at a hearing, not the two main ones. This is like a small subplot, and Strauss is worried about the exportation of isotopes. I forget which type of isotopes. And essentially, Oppenheimer testifies to the opposite, and he uses things. He says you could use a beer for isotopes or a beer to make a bomb. Essentially, I know I'm paraphrasing this
Yeah.
poorly, but you get the idea. So he basically implies that Strauss doesn't know what he's talking about and that he's getting worried over something that should not be worried about. And this is a more open mocking of Strauss's uh, limited knowledge and intelligence.
Yeah, so it's that happened in real. The cool thing about this movie is that pretty much everything in it happened in some semblance, at least in real life. So in actual history, in 1949, I
Mm-hmm.
believe is what Google is telling me. Yeah, 1949. There is this movement with the U.S. to ship nuclear-friendly material that is not
Mm-hmm.
nuclear to what is now NATO to boost their economies, boost their science, this, that, or the other. There's a million things you can use isotopes for, and there's probably like 1,000 things you can use radioactive isotopes for, to speak to Oppenheimer's point in this. But the concern is that in 1949, the US is the only nuclear power.
Right.
Um, Maybe Britain's figured it out by now. I don't think they have. I think it's the US and then the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union gains nuclear capabilities in 1949, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the better part of 4 years, the US stands alone on the nuclear summit. And there's this very genuine fear that if we start giving these things out that are used to make nuclear weapons, all these other countries are going to have nukes. And then it's not going to mean anything anymore. So Strauss, being, though not an actual scientist, a man who understands basic nuclear science, is like, we probably shouldn't be giving these things to Norway or to whoever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we shouldn't poke that bear. And Oppenheimer, correctly but incredibly narcissistically and egotistically, just annihilates his logic in
Mm-hmm.
front of this entire internationally watched group, committee, whatever it is, and says like, okay, sure, you can use isotopes to make a bomb, but you also need all these other things, and you can use beer to make a bomb, and you can use sandwiches to make a bomb, and you can use pencils to make a bomb. And his point is that so much went into the Manhattan Project that giving a country a single essence of it poses no real threat unless they know what the
Right.
hell to do with it and have the other 150 parts.
Yeah, you're not giving them a blueprint. You're just giving them
Yeah,
a resource.
and again, he's correct, like objectively, scientifically correct, but he's believing his own myth at that point in history and at that point in the movie. Like, he is the father of um, nuclear science, and like you said in
Right.
our last episode about how he built the character of Oppie, this is the character of Oppenheimer. Like, I don't know whether the actual J. Robert Oppenheimer thought his shit didn't stink,
Yeah.
but the public image is that yeah, he
Okay.
knew all and he was smarter than everybody.
Okay. So we have that where Strauss is insulted, publicly. And then there's also in between these two hearings, or maybe not in between, prior to these two hearings, there is a dinner where they discuss security while the Manhattan Project is going on. And this is probably the part that I had the hardest time following
Sure.
during the film because there were so many different pieces to this and it was so out of order. It was hard to tell what was happening. But they're at like this dinner. There's a big bouquet of flowers in the middle of the table so they can't see each other from across the table. But Oppenheimer is pushing for cooperation
Mm-hmm.
and with the Soviets, and Strauss is doing the exact opposite. He
Yeah.
wants everything locked down. He wants no information crossing over, and we start to see it's one of those which way's right, neither.
Mm-hmm.
But Oppenheimer is fearing this mass. You know, he's fearing the Cold War, but it not being a Cold War, it
Yeah.
being essentially an apocalypse and just nuclear bombarding of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Strauss is very much has faith in the United States instead, and thinks that their security will keep it from ever traveling across the sea, essentially. So, really, the way to work without giving away the mystery of it, because it's not revealed until the end. But I guess we're gonna have to work this backwards. The big reveal towards the end of the movie is it's been Strauss all along.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one who set up the hearing to deny Oppenheimer his security clearance. And he says it can't be McCarthy and it can't be a trial. This is simply a hearing. And he is doing it intentionally to put Oppenheimer against the wall and have no way to defend himself. His lawyer is uninformed. The entire game and the entire system is rigged against him. They bring in testimony after testimony, and they're going to decide at the end of it to deny his security clearance, which essentially means he no longer has the ability to work in the sense that he did before, and he's lost a lot of his credibility as a result. So it is to, in long term, humiliate Oppenheimer as revenge of him humiliating Strauss earlier on. Again, this is working backwards, but that's we kind of have to get that out of the way. So did this really happen in that sense?
Yeah, so basically what occurs is exactly what happens in the movie, minus just a little bit of Hollywood stuff. So the FBI is watching Oppenheimer like before the Manhattan Project.
Right.
Just because if he's not a communist, he hangs out with a lot, like objectively a lot of communists. And even before World War II, that's not something that the government was a fan of. And then after World War II, it's a big no-no. He's also part of the Atomic Energy Commission, and he's the loudest voice on it, speaking to Strauss and Truman and Eisenhower. And he's the father of the bomb, you know. So he's this massive character in American society up to this point. And what ends up happening is just that this man gives a lawyer named Borden gives a letter to J. Edgar Hoover saying, in my professional opinion, and this is the tail end of McCarthy, like this is like 1953, that more probably than not, J. Robert Oppenheimer is giving secrets to the Soviet Union, whether he's a spy or just a communique. And nobody in places of power, so Eisenhower, really believe it. But you don't want to be that idiot who didn't believe it, and it turns out that your top scientist is actually the reason the Soviets have an atomic bomb.
Right.
So he suspends Oppenheimer's security clearance vis-a-vis executive channels. And then he allows a hearing. However, Strauss, being on the Atomic Energy Commission, this kind of falls under his purview, and he does exactly what he does, or more or less exactly what he does in the movie, and he turns it into a witch hunt. But it's a private, in-one-room witch hunt that nobody sees because it's just supposed to be a security clearance hearing.
Right.
So his lawyer is not given info because it's not a trial. It's just supposed to be a security clearance hearing.
And they don't have to follow the rules like you would with a normal trial.
Exactly. And so if it's a real hearing, the reason for the privacy is because you're talking about classified shit in this hearing, and only people with top secret clearance should be allowed to hear it. The problem with that is that a jury doesn't have top secret clearance, and Congress does not have top secret clearance. And some of the guys in it don't have top secret clearance still.
Gotcha.
So you get to, if it's a hearing, it protects the sanctity of the information, but if it's a witch hunt disguised as a hearing, it makes it almost impossible to rebuttal their claims, as you see in the movie.
Right. So Oppenheimer is fighting this losing battle the entire time. But he's not alone. He's not the only one. It is going to be mentioned that several members of the project were blacklisted. And one of them, Fuchs, is confirmed to be a Soviet spy.
Yes.
Is that legitimate? He really was?
That's legit. There was a member of the Manhattan Project that Oppenheimer directly vouched for that was legitimately giving atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. And they think is one of the reasons that the Soviets went from absolutely no nuclear program at all to, with their incredibly destroyed economy and industrial sector post-World War II, having a bomb within 3 years, effectively.
Interesting.
It is just, it's fascinating. And then there's also the Chevalier incident, which is where Hakon Chevalier, another scientist working with Oppenheimer, who is not a spy, just to clarify the record, Chevalier is not. He brings concerns to Oppenheimer about questions a different scientist who has not been proven to be a spy was asking, and the amount he was pushing, cooperating with Soviet Union. Oppenheimer, without thinking, reveals that he's been made aware of a potential security leak to that watchdog from the army that is the crazy anti-spy guy.
Pax.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Boris
Pash.
Yeah, Colonel Boris Pash. Yeah. Accidentally reveals, much like in the movie, accidentally reveals it to him, but then realizes that if he's wrong, he's probably going to get his colleague thrown in federal prison.
Or killed.
or killed, or interrogated by the FBI and killed, and immediately concocts this complete and utter bullshit story about this, like, back and forth conversation, but he's just trying not to implicate Chevalier, because Chevalier has nothing to do with it other than what Oppenheimer know. But in the 1940s, 1950s, we have to stop communist at all costs mindset. Anybody who talks to a suspected spy is now also a suspected spy.
Gotcha.
So
like it was contagious.
Yeah, it's this mess, and when it comes up at the hearing, it's one of the main pieces of evidence, circumstantial though it is, that they use against him is, well, if you weren't a Soviet spy, what do you care? Why didn't you just tell the truth about how you heard this information? And he's like, well, I didn't want him arrested. And their counter logic is, well, if he was a spy, he should, you know what I mean? So it's that like, since he lied, and since he kept the lie going for so long, and since he's very hesitant to tell the truth even in the hearing, it's just one of those, clearly you haven't been 100% honest, and since you haven't been 100% honest, we are perfectly okay with revoking your security clearance, because it's a kangaroo court. But it's one of those, his lack of knowledge of politics, which comes up again and again and again in the movie and in his life, kind of hangs him on that one.
Because he never wanted to be a politician.
No,
he wanted
he's not.
to be a scientist.
He's just the guy who built, like, the atomic bomb, but he realizes the public significance of that. As you see in the movie, I can't really speak for him as a person, but I'm assuming it's pretty accurate, because how often are scientists good politicians and vice versa, you know? Right. I think the trial is when he realizes how deep he has been placed into the swamp that is, like, 1950s politics.
Right.
Like, you think today is whack. Oh, buddy.
So, one of them that was on the Manhattan Project that is not going to be blacklisted is a little man named Teller. And he is going to continue the project of the hydrogen bomb.
Yes.
So he did successfully make the hydrogen bomb. Was that his project, or?
So, at some point, we do get a hydrogen bomb, the details of which escape me, but I think it's in the 50s. He is part of it. I don't know if he's the father of the hydrogen bomb, because honestly, at that point, people are so used to nuclear warfare that having a bigger, badder bomb really only matters to the people who are paying for it. Right. The hydrogen bomb thing is that Teller brings up in the Los Alamos Project, again, most of this dialogue, if it was written down and recorded, is taken from the statements, which is cool. So the statement that Teller reads in Oppenheimer's hearing is exactly word for word what he said in the hearing based off of the notes that were taken during it.
Very interesting.
Which is so cool. Anyway, sometime in the Los Alamos Project, Teller is like, hey, we could do a hydrogen bomb. Hydrogen's way easier to get, or, you know, radioactive hydrogen is way easier to get our hands on than uranium or plutonium, and it will make a bigger explosion. And they go, okay, that's great, but how do we light it? And he goes, well, you have to have a small uranium or plutonium fission. And they go, okay, so, like, if we have to do that anyway, and we're pressed for time. In Los Alamos, he's dismissed because it's an extra step of development they don't need to take, because to make a hydrogen bomb, you already have to know how to make a fission bomb, like a traditional fission bomb. And then when you have, 15 or 20 or 100, whatever it was in 1949 fission bombs, why do you need hydrogen bombs is kind of the opposition to it. But Strauss represents the military's and the government's view of that, which is bigger bomb is better. So I don't care what the logic behind not needing one is. If you can make a bigger bomb, I want a bigger bomb.
Right.
Because the Soviets have a bigger bomb. And Oppenheimer's like, okay, but, like, if we have one hydrogen bomb and we have 5 fission bombs, we have the same, like, what? It's all nuclear. It all blows up cities. I don't know why you care. Because, again, it's that disconnect between science for science's sake and
Mm-hmm.
science for the purpose of killing other people.
Okay, so he's gonna have a future, continuing kind of down an extension of the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer is gonna leave Los Alamos prior to his security clearance hearing. So he's already left, which means it's prior to the Strauss hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, what okay, so let's move forward.
Hmm.
What brings on the Strauss hearing? Is Dr. Hill a real person?
So yeah, Rami Malek's character David Hill is a real physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project,
No.
and he is best known for his 1959 testimony against the nomination of Louis Strauss as United States Secretary of Commerce. So that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is that Strauss he was an admiral in the Navy Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
He served in World War One. He has been the chairman of the Atomic Energy Committee for almost a decade at this point, if not more. He is a consummate politician. As you see in the movie, it's very difficult to get him to show how he truly feels about things. The last step in the political ladder for him is to be elected to the cabinet, so to speak, like the highest positions we have in the land. If you are the head of commerce, you are the principal advisor to the president for everything relating to commerce,
Okay.
trade, tariffs, the economy to some extent. You wield immense influential power over the president and his policies. And again, like anything else in the US, it's kind of tempered by like democracy and Congress. But you have a whole lot of sway and a whole lot of influence. To be confirmed to that, it's much like being a Supreme Court justice. You have to have a Senate hearing. So he is voted in the mini council, which is what they do first,
Mm-hmm.
by a very slim victory margin of 9-8 to be able to advance to the full congressional vote to see if he can get approved. He actually, things go very much like they do in the movie. He seems to have it rolling. They ask him about his influence with Oppenheimer. He tries to act like Oppenheimer did it himself.
Yep.
And then in literally like the 11th hour, like the last possible minute, Dr.
Dr. Hill.
Yeah, Dr. Hill comes in and says exactly what he says. Again, everything they read is the real words from the things because Senate meetings are recorded. That
Yeah.
hearing was recorded for posterity's sake. So what Dr. Hill reads about how most of the scientists in this country would prefer to see Mr. Strauss completely out of the government and then accuses him of lacking integrity, of his arrogance, his vindictiveness, his quest for constant personal approval, his vengeance against Oppenheimer. He lays it all out for the Senate with absolutely no concrete proof,
Mm-hmm.
but people are already suspicious of why the head of the Atomic Energy Commission is not actively defending Oppenheimer,
Mm-hmm.
or at least trying to lessen the blow or trying to get him some form because he's out. Like his security clearance is gone. Oppenheimer's out of the government completely. So there's already that suspicion, especially in the minds of Congress, that are like, you're the head of the Atomic Energy Commission and the father of atomic everything just got kicked out the door and you seem weirdly not super upset about it.
Right.
And then to hear these claims, it's one of those things that it's too outlandish to be false, is why would these scientists say this if there wasn't something true about it?
Mm-hmm.
And John F. Kennedy is actually one of the senators who votes against him.
Interesting.
And he gets defeated by a thin enough margin because it's just a majority vote, but he gets beat by like 3 votes.
And he's like, I'm out. So he's out.
Yeah, he can't, he's out. And then his
Wait, hold on.
reaction.
But what does that mean? He's out. He's out. What does that mean?
It means he's not going to be the chairman of Congress.
So he just didn't get the job. He didn't get fired. He just didn't get hired.
He just didn't get the job, but you have to understand that for him personally, that's the end of the road. He has a history. Once this is all said and done, it's kind of like you pull the thread out and the whole thing falls apart.
Right.
His reaction to losing is just vindictive and self-pitying. He resigns from his appointment like he has to, but with not taste at all. No taste, very disgracefully. Then all his enemies that he's made, because he isn't moving up anymore, start to poke holes in his public persona and drag
Okay.
him down. So what he does in his political career is exactly what he does to Oppenheimer. If you don't make him the most important person in the room, he hates you. But he uses you until he thinks he can abandon you, and then he kicks you to the curb and gets you out of the way. And he does this again and again and again and again until he gets defeated in the vote to be Commerce Secretary. And
And then you,
then you've been publicly exposed. Like now these scientists are saying that you went against Oppenheimer, and all your political enemies are like, "Oh man, well if they if the public already don't like him, let me tell you a thing."
right. Okay, so it's essentially the end of his political career.
And it's more personal than it is anybody else. Most of it is that when narcissists, like Strauss seems to be, are
Mm-hmm.
denied gain, they either seek it somewhere else or they completely self-destruct. And he seems to have self-destructed.
Okay. Expertly and absolutely beautifully portrayed by Robert Downey Jr.
Yes.
Fun fact that no one else cares about. My fiance did not know that was Robert Downey Jr. until she saw that he won the Oscar, and she's like, "Wait, who did he play?" I'm like, Strauss? He's in half the movie. She's like, "Oh my gosh, that's him." I'm like, "How did you not realize?"
When
I
I
don't know.
saw him in when I watched it in theaters, I was like, "Is that?" And then he spoke, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's Iron Man!"
Yeah. Okay. So both the trials have wrapped up. Um, our movie is drawing to an end, and it
Finally,
kind of
after 3
feels,
hours,
bro, it flew by though.
it does. It's crazy.
I, you know me, you got to earn a long run time, but I feel like this one earned it.
The
This
problem
one
is, you
earned it.
think a long run time's an hour and 45 minutes. So,
Anything over
but
90 minutes, man, I'm like, all right, if it's not Oscar contender, I don't want to see this.
wrap it
Um,
up. People have shit to do.
I got things to do. Okay. So both the trials that are not trials have
Right.
wrapped up. Um, and you know, if you think of like the themes of the movie, really neither side was a victor.
No.
Both sides lost. Um, Oppenheimer is out. Strauss is out. We did a couple quick moments after this where it shows Oppie when he's old and he's standing there with Kitty and it says, just remember, is it Einstein who's saying this? When you're old and they give you awards and they'll congratulate you, he says, just remember, it won't be for you, it'll be for them.
Yeah, it's
So,
Einstein saying
so
that.
he's old, he's getting this medal, and he's getting a medal for what has haunted him. The achievement that made him who he is, but it also has haunted him for all these years. And Kitty won't shake Teller's hand. What do you think's going on there?
Honestly, I think what it is that she does not have to play the politics game. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to pretend that the betrayal of Oppenheimer, because that's what it is by a lot of those scientists. The refusal to back Oppenheimer's like validity in security clearance matters is not a betrayal. Like she
Mm-hmm.
refuses to acknowledge that they had to do it. He has to, and he's clearly moved on. You know, because his whole shtick in the movie is live fast, live loose, do what you want, sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even as a even as the leader of Los Alamos. But for Kitty, it's a very personal thing that has happened, and they ousted the most brilliant nuclear mind for their own personal gain. So I think it's a lot of things with her. I think she's like, really? Like this is what you think now that it's all now that he's getting an award, you can just ignore the fact that you threw him to the dogs. Like,
Kitty just seems to be mad about everything going on because she also says to Oppenheimer, do you think making yourself a martyr will make them forgive you? And he goes,
mhm.
I don't know. I can just try.
I don't think he ever regrets making the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure that he regrets his behavior after making it. I think his regret is the haunting of a necessary evil, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that somebody was going to make it eventually. Why not me? And why not for the cause I made it for? But damn, it would have been really cool if I didn't, like,
No kidding.
because like I have become death, destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
That's yeah. And now, hell, everybody has nuclear weapons. Like present day, Israel has nuclear weapons, India has nuclear weapons, China, North Korea, or thinks they do, or is pretending they do, or whatever. We have a lot. Canada's got them. Britain's got them. Freaking almost all of NATO has a couple. Russia's got a ton. So yeah, Pandora's box, man.
So the words that you just said, "I've become death, destroyer of worlds," is from, I'm gonna say this wrong, Sanskrit scriptural text, the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is about this entity trying to impress a prince, and he grows multiple arms, and he says, "I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." Kind of showing that he has this power, but then he has to ask himself, does he want this power?
Mm-hmm.
So Oppenheimer actually died in 1967 of essentially throat cancer.
Yep. Which he was a chain smoker, which they
Yep.
show in the movie.
He smoked like a chimney, and he, paid the price because of it.
Yep.
Um,
And he worked with
so
all that radioactive
right,
material,
yeah,
so that probably didn't help his case.
no. Oppenheimer says earlier when he's talking to Einstein, he says, we were worried we were going to start a chain reaction that would end the world, talking about how they were afraid they would ignite the atmosphere. And he says, I believe we did. And it's kind of tragic because when he dies, we're still very much in the midst of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
The quote unquote enemy, well, I guess at that point, there's no quotes. The enemy, Soviet
Yeah.
Russia,
Yep.
has nuclear bombs. As we mentioned, bigger bombs have been made. Um, you know, Still to this day, those are the only two atomic bombs dropped on or used in war. But Oppenheimer died at a time where very much people were wondering how much longer until both sides just decided to launch some nukes at each other.
Yep.
Um, Man, that's a sad way to go, to wonder if your creation is going to destroy the world all the way up until your dying day. And very much still could. There's more nukes now than there ever was before, as far as we're told.
Yeah, I mean, there's
you know?
there's a lot of them. I think the crazy thing is that in the 22 years between Oppenheimer developing the very first atomic weapon and his death, is that you have gone from having to drop a single bomb, with a pre-timed charge out of a propeller aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
to you have so many ICBMs between the Soviet Union and the United States that you think that they view winning the war as who has the most potential to destroy the world so many times, like the most amount of times.
Right.
So you have it has become the new, like, I don't know, it's like kids hoarding candy. You only need so much of it, but you want all of it.
Right. Okay, man. You know what time it is.
Before we do the review, though, I do have a handful of fun historical tidbits.
Okay. I have a handful of ears to listen to them.
Oh, good. A whole handful? Ooh,
Yeah.
gross.
Well, I can't fit both of them in one hand, but
I don't want to know where you got the other ears, man. Some things I don't need to know.
don't
But
ask.
first fun historical tidbit is that the spy that we mentioned earlier, I'm
Mm-hmm.
blanking on his name, but the spy who was part of the Manhattan Project,
Fuchs.
has actually been linked to the Cambridge Five, which is a now infamous spy ring in Great Britain, operating during the Cold War, who were 5 Cambridge professors who went undiscovered for like 5 or 6 years and passed a crap load of information to the Soviet Union.
Interesting.
One of them was not discovered to be a spy until the 80s. So, It was either originally the Cambridge 5 and is now the Cambridge 6, or was originally the Cambridge 4 and is now the Cambridge 5. I can't remember which one, but yeah.
It's like secret agent hide and go seek.
Mm-hmm.
Who can be the last to be outed?
Second fun historical tidbit is that the largest nuclear weapon ever actually used, not combat, but tested, is the Tsar Bomba in 1961, June of 1961, was 50 to 56 megatons of TNT blast equivalent. Okay. Little boy, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, the first atomic bomb ever, and one of the only two ever used in combat, was 15 kilotons of TNT. To put that into perspective for our listeners, because we did the math and then edited it out for your listening pleasure, 1 megaton is 1,000 kilotons.
Yeah.
I.e., it would take
like 3,000. Wow.
Yeah, that boggles the mind. And to put it into perspective, little boy incinerated 10,000 or 20,000 people when it exploded, gone, and then ended up killing another 150 or so thousand, 70,000 at least from radiation exposure.
That's insane.
So when people say that nuclear warfare is a zero-sum game, by now, one atomic bomb is an entire eastern seaboard state gone.
It's hard to imagine.
I know. It's I am death, destroyer of worlds. It is absolute carnage unleashed.
I was going to ask you, why do they stop testing nuclear bombs? And it kind of sounds like because there's nowhere large enough to test them.
And not only that, there's this fun element called strontium something or other that is in every living organism on Earth, including bacteria, that to our knowledge did not exist before the age of nuclear tests.
Interesting.
So that's part of the reason, is because every nuclear explosion does irreparable damage to the atmosphere and the area surrounding it.
Wow.
I mean, only if you want to swim in not radioactive sludge for, 500-600 years.
I want to see a radioactive shark, man.
I do not.
I want to see what that looks like.
Because here's the thing, if I get close enough to see the radioactive shark, I'm probably already dead from cancer in 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, but you could have that story for the rest of your short life.
Yeah, true. Or it might cure my CF. I mean, who knows? Maybe
you never know, man. Maybe you did some superpowers from it.
Yeah, maybe it'll be like Spider-Man, but instead of being super, I'll just have a normal life expectancy. Who knows?
Well, then you'd have the cancer. That was the short life part, was the cancer.
It's like Deadpool.
It just
I have
solves
cancer,
your cancer,
but my body cures it faster than it can kill me.
So you're hoping it does that with cancer and the CF?
Well, whatever cancer the shark gives me, I'm hoping is nullified by the fact that the radiation is healing every part of my body, yes.
Okay.
But God doesn't give with both hands, so I'd probably grow a third eye and then, I don't know, get a tumor on my ear or something. And then my ear is as big as your ear, and it's like a hole.
Wow, just had to go there.
I am known for my stylishly small ears, sir.
Yeah, well, I can hear everything, so.
I know.
All right. 60 seconds on the clock.
Oh, for both of us? Oh, Jesus. I don't know, man. I don't know anymore. Who do you want to start? Who's feeling frisky today?
I'll start this time. For those of you, actually, this will probably be the first time we've done this for season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So Kyle and I are starting 60-second reviews, which means both of us, which he forgets in a future episode, both of us have to edit or sorry. So both of us have to state our review of the film in 60 seconds.
These were recorded out of order. I was framed.
Okay.
I was framed. I didn't know what was happening.
Ready?
No.
Okay. So, this film is spectacular. It is one of those I don't want to call a movie. I want to call a film because it just has that elegance. It has that artistic expression. It has just so much detail, so much work, so much care and love was put into this project. Perfectly acted. A little bit disjointed with the out of order writing. Perfectly directed. I love that everything was practical. I'm going to give it a 8.5 out of 10.
Okay, cool. Hey, you left me 20 seconds. You're so nice. So I second everything you said. From a historical perspective, it is flawless. It's like I 9.5 out of 10. I will never be able to give a movie 10 out of 10, but 9.5 out of 10 historically, and it really drives home the importance of the events in the movie.
3, 2,
boom,
1. You didn't give it a personal rating.
I said I second everything that you said.
Oh, so 8.5?
Okay, no, you stingy bastard. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 for personal enjoyment factor.
I will never give a movie a 10 out of 10.
I can give a movie 10 out of 10 for enjoyment. I can't give a movie 10 out of 10 for like objectively based things like historical accuracy or like, I don't know, acting.
Kyle watches documentaries and he goes, not exactly.
Yeah, because how else would I be an unbearable first world scholar if I didn't watch Ottoman's Rise of an Empire on Netflix and be like, that could have happened, but I also have an equally reliable source that says God came down and smited the cannon. So which was it really?
I think you just watch Ancient Aliens over and over again. You're like, it's starting to make sense.
No, I watch Ancient Aliens. I'm like, wow, we're racist. that's the message I get from Ancient Aliens. Have you noticed that white cultures never get accused of having aliens visit?
I've never actually watched Ancient Aliens, so if people are like, oh my gosh, such a white privilege thing to say, I have no idea what I'm talking about here.
I think my favorite is that for the longest time, people thought the pyramids were built by slaves because we just assumed that the farther back in time you go, the more oppressed people are. Right. And as it turns out, we have now found records that all of the workers that worked on the pyramids were not only paid, but they were thoroughly middle class by ancient Egyptian standards.
Very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were public works projects. Ancient Egypt was so unfathomably rich and untouched for most of its history, especially the Old Kingdom, which is the oldest section of ancient Egypt. Very, very confusing. I could do a whole podcast about ancient Egypt.
We need to watch The Mummy.
Yes. Anyway, the pyramids that the mummies crawl out of and kill the stupid British people every movie, they were built by mass public works funding.
Interesting.
Now, you were paid in beer and wheat, but you were paid.
What else would you want to get paid in, dude?
Well, money wasn't really a thing, so they didn't have enough precious metal to pay everybody, so they were like, here, tell you what, currency is bartering, and bartering is wheat and beer, so there you go.
I got beer, I got bread, and if I run out of beer, I can sell my bread and get more beer.
But anyway, point being, despite popular opinion of Herodotus and other historians, the pyramids were not slave labor. They were publicly funded projects.
Very interesting.
So the next time somebody tries to tell me we can't afford to build a monorail speed train across the country, I'm gonna point at the pyramids and be like, I don't know, man. I feel like we could.
I don't know, man.
I don't know, bro.
Oh, they just need one from Arkansas to Missouri. I hate that drive.
I think we just need to let Arkansas just... Sorry to any Arkansas viewers, but you give Missouri a bad rep. You come to Branson, you don't sound like us, you drive weird, and then you go home. And then we're left looking like the idiots.
All right. I don't know where this started.
Missouri pride, baby.
Missouri pride. All right. You Northerners, you're all the same.
You Northerners in Arkansas. Well, if you go far enough north, you're going south. So, you know what?
No, I'm saying from my perspective, you are a Northerner now.
Look, just because you moved to the actual Confederacy instead of the Diet Confederacy, that's not my problem.
You got to change from within.
Okay.
All right, we got off topic.
We should probably sign off, yeah.
All right. Next week, we're going to talk about a bunch of boys who show up to the East Coast and start some trouble.
Guns, gold, and glory, baby.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how Kyle snuck in another Mel Gibson movie on me.
Yep, I did. Master sneaker.
That's going to be Lethal Weapon or something.
I sneak more than an Air Jordan.
Dang, I hate you.
No, you don't. That was awesome. And
that was great. Gosh dang it. I hate it.
That was amazing, and it's going to make the final edit, and none of this is, and you're going to hate yourself.
It's horrible, and I'm leaving.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye, folks.